All right, welcome to a special edition of Desktop Discourse, a special manifest edition of Desktop Discourse. The theme of manifest this year is rise, and so we're going to spend some time in our Desktop Discourse sort of talking through what does it mean to rise in all the different ways that that can look like. So we're going to start with introductions. So whoever wants to get us started, if you just want to say name, your major and year, and your pronouns.
I'll start. Hi, I'm Mikey. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a rising senior, and I'm a PR major.
Hi, I'm Jaida Smigowski. I am a rising senior as well, and my pronouns are they, them, and my major is acting.
Hi, I'm Joyce. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I am a graduating senior in the creative writing fiction department.
Hi, my name is Sierra, and I'm a senior. Sorry. My name is Sierra. I'm a senior, and my major is music.
Hi, my name is Isaiah. I'm a rising senior. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a double major in television and cultural studies.
Hi, my name is Melly. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm the coordinator of events at SDI.
And my name is Charee Holloway. I'm the director of student diversity and inclusion at Columbia. My pronouns are she, her, or just Charee is fine as well. So I think just to start us off, we've had a little bit of conversation in preparation for this particular desktop discourse. And we were talking a little bit about what does it mean to rise? And I think specifically when you're part of a marginalized community, a vulnerable community, or an underrepresented community, however you want to sort of frame that, does rise have a different meaning for you, or does that influence how you define what it means to rise? So I guess we'll start there with what does rise mean for you?
Rise to me is kind of like being able to adapt to certain situations. Because life is very unpredictable at times, and being able to adapt through that, and also navigating the different identities that I have and their intersectionalities, and what I can do to make life as easy for me as possible. Although there are challenges that are predisposed to me, just because of who I am and what I do. So being able to overcome that and adapt to it, and making the life that I want for myself.
I agree in terms of adaptability, and I also want to add that there's not really a one size fits all for it, aside from something different than you were before, as opposed to just being like, oh well, this is the starting point for everyone, and to rise you need to be this, and this.
Yeah, I feel similarly to both of you guys. I think rising is just overcoming and surpassing the unpredictabilities of life and how random it is and how real it is. Coming out of a situation despite possibly having depression, anxiety, PTSD, things of that nature that are just so very humanly there, but to overcome it and to continue just living.
Yeah, I agree. Recently, when I've been thinking about the word rise or the concept of rise, I just have the image of like a phoenix in my head, very much how phoenixes, their whole thing is like they die and then they come back, and so they're immortal basically because they're always reborn from their ashes. And I feel like that's a really pretty way to look at the way or to look at the things that everyone is saying, just the ability to always come back and the ability to always push forward and do all the things that you want to do regardless of all the things that are thrown at you.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that, about what all of you or each of you were saying, but especially that imagery that you mentioned, Joyce, and how also too there's that. I think sometimes it can be easy to look forward to, okay, like I've risen and I'm here, and now everything is going to be good and like smooth sailing. And I've been thinking about how oftentimes that really isn't the case. Like maybe you kind of surpass one challenge or succeed in one area of your life, but there are still other things that are kind of waiting to greet you as you reach that space. So I've been thinking a lot about how do we still celebrate the things that we have risen through and the things that we have accomplished, even if there is still a bunch of other things that are calling our attention as well. And I think especially holding like marginalized identities, it can be sometimes hard to even remember that we're allowed to relax and celebrate and take pride in our accomplishments and our achievements, because we're so programmed to survive and to keep working. And okay, now that I've risen through this challenge, let me like hit the next one, you know? I think especially during this time that we are all in like this great pause, sitting with all of that has been really just coming to my mind a lot. Has it changed how any of you are thinking about this end of the year time? And I feel like it's usually a time that we are, yes, like thinking about like finals and projects, but also looking forward to celebrating with our friends and our family, and if not graduation, just the end of the school year. So I'm curious as to how each of you are thinking about that.
Say your question again. I think I had it in my brain. I was like, I think I missed something.
Yeah. That's okay. I feel like I talked a lot right now. Yeah, I guess how are you approaching celebrations, specifically end of the year celebration, during this really different time where there can be like a lot of conflicting emotions, with having finished, you know, a really long school year, but also we're existing in this really weird space right now. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's what I thought you said, but I wanted to make sure. I'm really looking forward to shutting my laptop for like a solid week or two, maybe a month. I don't even want to look at this thing. Yeah, I'm just really excited to like not be in school, which is weird because like it's just been so long, especially being in this weird period of stillness, which I talked about in the stillness video, of even though we are in this big period of stillness that's really never hugely been seen in our country, that we're still not allowed to be still, and we're still not allowed to interact and be a part of it. We have to keep going in some way, shape, or form. And I'm really excited to just not have to force myself to go against this very obvious thing that's telling me to stop moving.
Like Jaida said, I am also really excited to close my laptop for a while. I also think that it's going to be really important and cool to get like rest from school and a little bit of work. And I think that, you know, celebration to me just looks like a warm bed at the moment. Because, you know, I feel like we have constantly, at this point, had to like rise and adapt and keep going through all of like the pandemic situation and changing formats for class and work and all that. And I think that, you know, rest is the way that we need that at this point, or at the point when we are at least kind of given a little bit of permission to stop and plateau even.
A lot of celebrations just recently have been like virtual. Like even a couple weeks ago, my friend Jaida, her birthday was like a Zoom party, and like all of us like got in and we were like just talking over Zoom, which is pretty weird. And then other celebrations are more like through, like for me personally, just through like emails, congratulating based on whatever. I mean, more recently, like with my internship that I was able to get, and also being elected SLC president for next year, like those are just like virtual kind of things. So that's pretty interesting. And then my birthday coming up in the next like week and a half, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I didn't plan on doing anything anyway, but to have it, to like not even have the option to want to do something is pretty interesting. Something I haven't really had in a while. But I mean, a lot of celebrations and stuff have been virtual and kind of just like over the phone and not really in person, anything like that. So it's been pretty different, but it's been, yeah.
I think, so a lot of you touched on this, the notion of resiliency, right? And rising above and overcoming. And I think for me, that gets really complicated when we think about how that shows up in like marginalized communities. So to use myself as an example, as like, as like a person of color, I feel like like you're celebrated for like rising, right? And celebrated for being resilient and celebrated for accomplishing in spite of. But sometimes it feels like that conversation never moves to like, why did I have to overcome this basic stuff to begin with? Like, why was it harder for me to rise? Like, I wasn't able to rise. Like, I had so many more obstacles and barriers in my way. But that becomes sometimes like taboo to even talk about. Like, you can be celebrated for rising and like overcoming, but don't talk too much about like where those barriers came from. Like, especially if they're like systemic barriers like racism and sexism and homophobia, like really don't talk about those. And so I think sometimes like when folks talk about like celebration or, accomplishments or things like that, like I want to celebrate those things both for myself and for other people, but I also want to always create space to like critique why we had to rise in the first place. If that makes sense. I don't know if that resonates with other folks, but that's something that I always think about when I think about like what it means to accomplish or rise above things or whatever that looks like.
I actually talked about that a little bit a few days or weeks ago when it was, I forgot what day it was. It was some day. I think it was Trans Day Visibility or something, but I made a post on Instagram, and on days like dedicated to queerness and whatnot, a lot of posts are about like celebration and pride, which is great and obviously needed, but there are not many posts about like it's okay to like just be okay, like it's okay if this day is just like any other day. It's okay if you don't feel any specific sense of pride. It's okay if you're not okay with your identity. There's not a lot of posts about like the journey and the middle ground, and if there are, then it's always like harsh and heartbreaking and made into a Hollywood movie so straight people can see trauma porn. But it's interesting that people place so much emphasis on like the perfect happy ending, and then like you're not allowed to talk about an unhappy ending. But if you're going to talk about a happy ending, then like you have to validate it with the trauma you went through. And it's weird. It's kind of like how a lot of minorities, like we joke about like, oh, I wrote my trauma down as the college like app essay, and I know we all did. I know we all did because I did. But it's like, dang, isn't that kind of like screwed up that we had to do that? We had to like cash in our trauma for the admissions people to be like, okay, maybe I can check off a few boxes with this one. But oh, it's interesting.
And it's interesting to me because, like, can you admit in those circumstances that, like, my trauma's ongoing, right? Like, I think you're absolutely right in that, like, you can only talk about your trauma if there's like an ending and you overcame it, and hooray! Not that, like, no, I'm still dealing with my trauma every single day. That doesn't necessarily, I don't know if that has the same, like, neat little bow on it.
I mean, it's weird to say, but like for everybody in this group, because we were all marginalized people, trauma was kind of like our birthright. Like, we came out the womb having to have all this trauma. Like, from we were supposed to rise. We have to survive. Other people can just survive. They can literally do nothing and have a content life. We have to, even if I just wanted to be a farmer in the country, I just want a ranch house. It's all I want in my life. That's all I wanted. I still have to rise out of so much to get that, as opposed to cis white male, for example. They can just be born and get it. Like, you know, trauma and rising and overcoming is kind of like our, like I said, our birthright.
Yeah, I agree with like Joyce and Jaida. Like, it's almost what is expected of us. We're expected to have a trauma. We're expected to rise above something and talk about that trauma and like benefit from it. And then even if we do talk about and benefit from it, there's a problem with that as well, because people are like, you're using that. That's like it's a special item or something, or like a special move to pull out, you know? And I was kind of thinking about this last night. Like, you're either not maybe not the word trauma, but you're not interesting enough with how your struggle is and like all the things you went through. Like, what I guess I was trying to say, like, you can be, I don't know, it can be, yeah, it's hard to explain a little bit, but I was like, you're either too traumatized or you're not traumatized enough for some things. And it's just like, why does it have to have, you know, a balance on it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and people have their own like takes on like what their favorite trauma to hear about is. Like, there's a classic I came out the hood story and stuff like that, but nobody wants to hear about how you overcame being assaulted, sexually assaulted by somebody. Like, that's just like a, oh no, especially if that could possibly be somebody's friend, somebody who's somewhere in power. Like, there's they kind of treat trauma like their ice cream flavors, and so people just want certain ones, and you also have to rise out of that as well.
Yeah, all these points and kind of like the thread that you were kind of starting, Sierra, made me think of like how like you're almost seen as more valid of a person if you have like risen or superseded that trauma. It's like now you can be seen, right? Like, you got out of the hood, but nobody wants to hear your story when you're in it, you know? Or at that point it's like, well, I don't know, I just feel like you almost have like less of a voice because there's less of like a chance of being seen by other people. Yeah.
Well, I think that's so damaging, because it presents, you know, to keep with trauma, right? It presents trauma as a thing that is overcome, and that is such a false, and in my opinion, like, dangerous narrative and way to talk about trauma. Like, and it doesn't introduce like the notion of healing at all. And we, you know, healing is a messy process. It's a non-linear process. You know, trauma is a thing that will live in your body for a long time. And to your point, Jaida, you know, there's so much research on like generational trauma, right? And so the ways that trauma is passed down collectively to different folks and different populations. And I think that it can present these like really unrealistic notions of what it means to heal or what it means to have trauma in your life that just ends up exacerbating that trauma. So I think it can become really, it can just be really problematic and really dangerous and feed notions, I think particularly for students, that you're supposed to, that healing has to look some kind of way, and that if you're not looking that kind of way, then you're not doing it right. And I think that is just very, very damaging, the way that messaging is reinforced.
Yeah, and to Charee's point about like healing not being linear, I look at rising similarly. It doesn't just go straight up; it goes all over the place, like a roller coaster, really. And if you try to package it in a certain way, you may think that you've reached. Because for me personally, when I've gone through certain things, I've gotten to a point where I think I'm okay, and then you try like to move past it, but you didn't really deal with it because you just let things happen, and then you fall right back into it, as opposed to like just dealing with it in the stages that it comes in. And then growing up with like an racialized identity, that's the first thing a lot of people see when they notice me, is, your race, and they already make these judgments and have these notions about you straight off the bat, and then like having to overcome that to like improve your humanity to certain people is kind of it's tiring. And after a certain point, you realize that you don't have any obligation to do that. You just want to just be who you are and do what you do, and then whoever sees you for who you are will see you for who you are. And then anyone who doesn't belong in your life, whether it's in a systematic kind of scope of things or a more personalized system of things. So it's really interesting having to deal with that, and then like understanding like the different intersections of your identity, and then making sure not to disavow any part of your identity, to like try and compartmentalize it into one certain thing, and knowing that they all work together, as opposed to dismissing one part of your identity in benefit of another. Like that's basically like in regards to certain privileges that you may have. Like for me personally, like being born like biologically with the male sex, it's like that's already has its privileges in its own right, no matter what my gender identity may be, because that isn't necessarily put out there. As soon as someone meets me, they see someone who is a little bit more masculine and a little bit more like man presenting. So like they'll see that and they already make those assumptions, and that's already a privilege assigned to that as well. And not disavowing that, understanding that and working around that, and understanding how that intersects into other parts of who I am and what I do. And I think that's part of my like rising as well, is understanding the privileges that you have, whatever identity that may be, and also understanding the marginalization of certain identities, and how just because you have a marginalized identity doesn't disavow your privileged identity. And that's really important for me to understand, and that's how I think rising is most beneficial for me personally, is understanding that and not trying to be like, okay, well, I'm queer, so that just means that's just all that is. No, there's certain privileges that come to me because of my biological sex that that the world will see. And then obviously once they get into conversation and they realize my pronouns, my gender identity, and what have you, things may change in a certain right, but inherently there are certain privileges that will come with who I am and what I look like.
That definitely makes me think of, know all the rules and break them kind of thing. Like society has all these rules and all these ideas, and we're born into it, and in the beginning we kind of follow them, right? But then we realize that's not how our life has to be. Like we can change, we can think outside of the box, we have more freedom to like do what we feel and like the ideas we've had. And I just been feeling recently, all these labels that we use and the things that we use to describe ourselves, it can be helpful in certain instances, but it's also good to know that I'm not defined by that one label, and I can be more just in anything. And then just to not think everyone's watching you all the time. I felt like people were watching me all the time, or that I was being judged, or I had this high standard to uphold, or I could never look bad, or I can't do this, or even being like Black, or you can be like, Black people are supposed to do this, oh, so I don't want to do that. Or Black people need to stand up to stereotypes, so you're not going to do that stereotype. And it's just like, it's just made up, it's just made up, and it's put onto us, and it's just rejecting that and pushing on with the fact and trying to find yourself and doing just what makes you feel good and comfortable and never settling.
I think sort of given some of the things that we've talked about, originally when we asked the question, sort of what does it mean to rise, y'all mentioned things like overcoming, right, adaptability, being able to sort of navigate life and continue living despite the things that are sort of in your way. But I think like you've articulated that this notion of rising is way more nuanced than we sort of give credit to. So I guess I would sort of repose the question, like, is there anything that you would want to sort of add to what it means to rise, or any sort of nuances to that have come to you throughout this conversation?
I feel like for a lot of people, the concept of rise is also tied to like being productive in some way, shape, or form, especially with the current like theme of manifest being rise. We're still, students and professors and staff and faculty, like we're all still expected to produce something, and we're expected to produce something and have something to show for it, even though there are like several things going on in the world that we could be worrying about, but instead we have to worry about midterms and finals and showcases and projects and things that at the end of the day don't really matter, because no one's gonna care about your final project when you're like 40. No one cares, but you have to care, because we're still forced to like have something to show for. Like, it's almost like you can't rise if you don't have proof that you've risen, and the only way to have proof that you've risen is if you continue like working yourself to the bone, in a sense. Like the past few weeks, like there have been so many like student conversations on the Columbia app and just like between me and other friends where we're all just exhausted, but we're like not allowed to be exhausted. And if you reach out to professors, you might get lucky and you might have understanding ones, or you might be like me, where I have professors who give me attitude over the email, and they'll be like, I would rather you turn your work in than respond to an email. And it's like, well, you're emailing me, so I don't know what you want. And it's just weird that like you still have so many expectations thrown on you, but you're quote unquote expected to rise from them and rise to certain expectations, when like, why do we have to do anything in the first place? Why does it matter?
I think I would keep the majority of my original definition of rise, but I would just add on to do it at my own terms, to overcome at my own terms of the situation. Like we keep talking about this need to be productive, where like our country is driven off of mass production and having things come out so quickly, and for our whole country to shut down, everybody's kind of like, what do we do now? And then people feel like it's kind of like if you turn a bike upside down, but all the wheels are still turning, but it's not going anywhere. I feel like a lot of people just feel like that right now, and there's nothing wrong with having a moment of stillness, nothing wrong with not rising at this moment. Like sometimes you just can't do it. You'll just end up doing this, and you're gonna get mad at yourself for it, but you're just not ready to do this, and it's okay. And you should be able to do stuff at your own terms. It shouldn't have to be driven by someone who, if you run off of being productive, okay, kudos to you. I want to sit down and I want to watch this Netflix series that just came out. Like I want to do that. Like if you want to write 5 screenplays right now, all power to you. You go ahead and write them. Go ahead, Tyler Perry, do it. Like I don't care. But we shouldn't have to be driving off of somebody else's terms, especially when this whole moment of stillness that we have just show that so many things are not real. Money is just money. Time is not real. Like, we could run off of socialism. Like, so many things have been revealed. Like, so I don't think that I need to listen to anyone's terms anymore in terms of that.
With Rise, I mean, I guess I'll add usually just focus on my own rise and falls in it. Not really looking at anyone else's, because the ride is different, the speed is different, the journey is different, the destination is usually always different as well. That's a big thing. I learned that very young, like just not to compare myself to anyone. It's not look at anyone else's plate, basically, and to just like keep doing what I do at my own pace, how I want to do it, because then you start to conflict yourself with when you compare to other people what they're doing, because you don't know the circumstances in which they're operating in and how they're getting things done or how they're not getting things done. The resources they have may be something that is more available to them than it is to you, or vice versa. So usually I just focus on my own thing and just like keep myself focused on my own goals, not really care what that we may have, like in terms of like being in college. A lot of people have the same major as you and they might be a little bit farther ahead in what they're doing or whatever, but you don't know what their life brought them to. For me personally, I got into media the last semester before I got to college. So my last semester of high school is when I really got into it. And there's some folks in my department who have been doing it since they were like 12. So like they've had that passion, they've had those resources, they've had that experience. I have not. So there's no need for me to compare what I'm doing to them, because it's not the same thing. And I think that's usually what keeps me level-headed, because if you start comparing, then you start to get into your own head about what you can do, what you can't do, your limits and your limitations and things like that. And so I just know like I'm working at my own pace and I'm happy with what I'm doing. And if I'm not happy with what I'm doing, then I'll change it. But as long as I'm content with how my life is going and how I'm doing it, then that's all that really matters, because it's no race, honestly, at all.
I want to add just briefly that like rising and falling aren't the only options. Like there's more to it than that. There's a whole assortment of different things that just involve being still, and like rising is important, but is the world going to suffer if you are not constantly on or constantly rising? No, of course not. I mean, as long as you are taking care of yourself, like that is a form of rising. It's just different and it doesn't look the same for everyone.
Yeah, like I relate to a lot of what you guys have said. I guess to me, I wanted to be really still when this happened, and I just felt like I couldn't. There was no time. I mean, there was that week and stuff, but just like, the wheels were still turning. Like you still had all these responsibilities. You had everything that you need to take care of. And I guess my idea of rise is like, just do what you think is the right thing. Whether in the end or not it was the best decision or it turned out amazing or not, just know in your heart that you did what was right for you, that you did what was right for your soul, that you did what was right, just period. And not to say period, but I just like believe in the flow of things. Like I thought I was going to be very devastated when my plan wasn't going according to plan. Like my path was diverging. I was like, this wasn't what I thought was going to be. Like, I had all these ideas. I was going to do this, that is going to go like this. I'm going to, and I've actually been more bending to it. I'm just like, well, there's nothing you can do, sadly. And you just have to find your new path, like diverge in the river and like let it flow with you. And because you don't have that control, it's hard, and it is like easy, I guess. In a way, it's hard to accept that you don't have the control and to think that you have no control. I don't think we don't have any control. We definitely have some kind of control in our lives and what we do. but in the big end game kind of thing, like I would still be here doing a discourse on a Zoom, even though I thought I was going to be traveling or something like that, and I can't be mad at it. I'm happy to be here, and it's just finding the good in things and trying your best, really, and looking back and reflecting on yourself and knowing you can always grow and improve yourself. I love growth and just trying to be the best of things and be at peace. Like, find your peace, find your rest, find what makes your soul feel good. And I think that's what's the most important.
I think I resonate with so much of that. I've been reading a lot lately about rest and napping and like the power of napping. And I think for me, like, rising today is like, I rose out of bed. You're welcome. And like, that's enough for this Friday. That's enough. That's all I can do. That's all I have the capacity to give. But getting to that point where I could define that for myself was not an easy path. Like, my path has meandered in so many different ways. And I think that, being able to define what that looks like for yourself is really an act of liberation, especially for marginalized folks, where our agency has been attacked and oppressed in so many different ways. Like, being able to sort of liberate yourself in that way, I think, can be very powerful. My last question, I think, is, when I was thinking a lot about rising, I think something that's unspoken for, especially for like folks from marginalized communities, underrepresented communities, is that, like, when you rise, how do you uplift? Because when you rise, you're often like forging a path or like opening doors for other folks. And I think particularly like for you all and the work that you do around diversity and inclusion at Columbia, like the things that you've done make this space and make Columbia more inclusive for the folks that are going to follow you. And so just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on what does it mean for you to, as you're sort of rising in whatever that looks like, what does that mean for like your broader communities that you're a part of, and the folks that, will follow you or sort of look to you?
I know for me personally, I try to be kinder to others than I am to myself. That sounds bad, but what I mean is I'm like very hard on myself for specific things, especially since I'm like a campus leader for 2 student orgs. I'm like very, very strict with myself. I have very like certain expectations with myself because I am a student leader on the campus. But at the same time, because of that, I want to be extra understanding and extra kind to other people who are also in those positions, or people who want to be in those positions, or just to anyone who might look to me for anything. Like, I know so many people in my life that I'm very close to where they just aren't used to being listened to, and that sucks, because you learn how to listen to people in kindergarten. So you would think that more people know how to listen to people and to care for people, but that's just not how the world works. And so I try to be very intentional with the way I listen to people and the way I treat other people, just because you're not going to accomplish anything if you're going to be mean to others who are in a similar position that you were. It's almost always better to be kind, and I feel like that's rich coming from me because I can be a mean person, but I try to be understanding and patient with others, in a way that I wish people were understanding and patient with me.
I mean, the priority to me is making, like Joyce said, making people feel listened to and engaged with. That's how you uplift someone. Like, if they feel like their voice matters, then they're going to go out and hopefully continue to make other people feel the same way and put forth the best of themselves.
For me, I like to think positively, try and try to be like very positive when it comes to the people in my life. And even if it's like, let's say they asked me about something and it was kind of bad, you can say like, oh, maybe this part, give a critical critique, like a helpful critique, but still be positive about it. Like, I still believe in you. I know you can get better and stuff like that. And it's just trying to reaffirm them and give that affirmation in life and having that more and then getting that back from them. It's so good. And I also realized what was really important to me is knowing the expectations that they have of me and what I expect from them, because sometimes you need a certain level of things. Like, you need me to communicate more. You need me to hit you up on your birthday or something, you know what I mean? Like, just certain things, not even like the basics, but very like specific needs, because we all have our own needs, and if we don't tell people, they're not really going to get met or not understood. So just trying to understand people, like how Joyce said, and be patient and just think of all aspects of things and always reevaluate yourself and like put everything on the table, you know what I mean? Like, kind of a neutral field almost. Like, it's not really bad or good, it's facts sometimes, not even facts, but like not it is what it is, but you can look at things more clearly without trying to put an idea to it straight away, or a bias or a thought that they are going to do this or that, and just taking away that stigma and being more open.
With uplifting and rising, I've always been under the mindset of like trying to help uplift people around me. I mean, that's just the nature of the work I've always done, and probably because of like how I was raised. My mom's a teacher. She's been a foster parent for as long as I've been alive as well. Like that kind of stuff. So like that kind of caring, nurturing kind of mentality has been around me for a long time. And also just like coming from where I come from, a lot of people, the friends that I have, we've always cultivated this kind of group mindset, and we always wanted to like help uplift each other whenever we could. And like we did everything together, and like our own accolades and accomplishments were for everyone, not just for the individual, because we all got there together. And even though life has taken us on different paths, we still stay connected, and we still try to uplift each other no matter how we can. And so the work that I've been doing in like community service, student leadership, and like peer mentorship here with this specific position, like that's just the work I've always been a part of. Like, it's not enough to like rise in myself, but community around me, from people that like want that kind of support and help. I'm not going to waste my energy for people that don't necessarily want it, but I want to give it back in any way I can. Help uplift people in that kind of way is very important to me. And also being like a role model for my younger siblings is very important to me as well. Like, if I can at least uplift anyone, I want to at least be able to uplift them and at least know that I've had an impact on their lives in some kind of way. I know I have had that impact on my dad specifically, like he a couple of days ago. So I mean, that's what I've always been doing, and always what I want to do is not just being it by myself, but to help uplift the community around me and the people around me as well.
I want to say a similar answer to Joyce about like I uplift the community that I am in, or the community I'm what's the word I'm trying to say? Influencing. Community I'm influencing through like being kind and being patient, but I can't say that. And here's why. I'm not saying I'm mean, but I think there's a lot of power in just simply the truth. And I want to uplift people by assisting them in any way or showing them their truth or the truth, and however that aspect is. Like, at the end of the day, we want to have everything be flowers and unicorns and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, shit just ain't sweet. Like, it's just really hard, and at the end of the day, the truth will set you free, like it's always been said. At the end of the day, my artist statement, when I leave this earth, I want to die with no lies, with no secrets. I told the truth all the way through, in my art, in my relationships, and with my family, all of it. And I think that's what I want to do for other people, is to show them that the truth and finding balance in your life with that is what's going to uplift you and help you rise in your journey that you take.
I think there's room for all of it, you know. There's room for the truth, there's room for the positivity, there's room for the listening, there's room for the influencing and uplifting. You know, I think there's space for all of it. And you know, something I've gotten from this conversation is just that this concept of rising is so much more expansive than certainly how I was originally thinking about it when I came into this conversation. But that there's so much there to sort of like get into and explore. But yeah, I think I have more questions about what rise means to me now than when I started this conversation. We are about at time. So unless anyone has any, you know, sort of final thoughts or questions, I just want to say thank you so much for making time to participate and have a really great conversation. To our seniors, Sierra and Joyce, congratulations, you are rising up out of here and rising away from Columbia onto, you know, more amazing things, and we can't wait to see what you do and where you head to be next. So thank you all so much. Thank you to folks that have tuned in. We hope that you enjoy all of the other Manifest offerings. Yeah, thank you.